So I don't know if this question will just totally throw us onto another track or whatever, but what you kind of got at was, so you mentioned something where kind of the way that, for example, Wisconsin does their state lands, it makes it a little bit easier for the state to potentially sell that land off. Maybe more so than I think if it were federal land, or maybe if it's maybe more so than if it was the way that another state more out west would do their state lands. I guess what I'm getting at is I've heard in the past before some people clamoring about avoiding having federal lands go under the control or ownership or management of the state.
Yeah.
And I always found that interesting to myself because a lot of times you hear about, the federal government is like this big brother, leave me alone. And there's no way that all these people just in Washington, D.C. could understand exactly how we do things out here on the other side of the nation or here in Wisconsin, And so I remember at first when I was, I guess I just didn't know a whole lot about it. I was kind of like, why are you guys avoiding that? Like, shouldn't you want Wisconsin to kind of like have its own, say and ownership and things? But actually, there was a lot of good reasons as to why people were clamoring kind of against that. Maybe you guys could speak to that, and maybe it's not all just a totally black and white thing, but maybe it is. I don't know.
No, it's there's some grade to it, but I think like ultimately, having things stay in public hands, and managed by our federal agencies, is something that we at BHA totally want to happen. I think that, like Jason's already started talking about some of the nuances with state managed land. I mean, you can't. I'll give you an example in Colorado. Hunters have to lease back land that already belongs to the states just so they can go hunting, right? And I think it's about 20%. Again, don't hold me exactly to that number, but it's like 20% of the state lands are actually open to hunting, and that's because hunters pay money to lease to be able to actually go hunt there. Okay.
Huh.
We've already talked about camping, right? Camping is either very limited or not allowed at all. When you think about Forest Service lands, you can stay for 16 days, and either you stay in a designated camp spot, or you're just out in the woods and dispersed camping. And as long as you're moving after those 16 days, you could literally. We had an intern a couple summers ago, Jack, that lived on public lands the entire summer. I love that story. I think he got tired of waking up in a wall tent and having to take a shower downstairs at our office. But so there's that piece, and then we've alluded to. Well, before I get into that, then there's if let's say that these federally managed lands were transferred to the states. Who's going to pay for law enforcement? Who's going to pay for road maintenance? Who's going to pay for fire? All those things, right? Those things add up, and our states, a lot of the states, around this country are not just rolling in money right now,
right?
And so they have a couple options. The first
which
one,
is baffling to me because when you look at your property tax bill, you're kind of like, how are you poor? I am paying you.
That's
anyway,
a whole nother rabbit hole underneath, and doesn't probably include a rabbit coming out on the other side.
Yeah.
But then there's this idea that so they have two options. One is that they can try to exploit these resources as much as possible for short-term gain, right? And try to to squeeze all the money they can out of that, whether that's through timber harvest, whether that's through oil and gas development.
Isn't that what some people have said happened in Texas, for example? I don't mean to speak out of turn or whatever. I don't know if that's
Texas is a whole, I almost look at it's the People's Republic of Texas, it's a little bit different than every other state, right? And I think there's different nuances in how Texas became a state and what happened when it became a state and that kind of thing. I will say here in a sec, a good example in the west of Nevada and then Utah and then Oregon and why this is a problem. But so they either can exploit it, right? Which again, when we talk about that, you want to have access to, and then the fish and wildlife habitat when you get there. Well, when the main reason for those state lands is to make money, other uses take a back seat to that. And I'm not going to say that there isn't examples where that's worked out in a positive way, because there is. But and really, if you look at it on a bigger level, that's just, we're going to lose out every single time. So they either do that or they sell it, right? And so that's the next piece I'm going to get to. So Nevada, when they became a state, they were gifted by the federal government 3 million acres. They said, here's 3 million acres that you can use it however you want. And so Nevada has chosen to sell 98% of that. They have 3,000 acres left, right? So it's 3 million to 3,000, okay? So that's an example. Then let's go to Oregon. Oregon has a state forest called the Elliott State Forest. It was a school trust kind of lands. And so that, again, is that main purpose is to generate money. Timber harvest is going on there. They stopped being able to do kind of timber harvest there, and so like the land board was like, we got to sell. And so that's when our members were like, no. This is a place where I've been elk hunting for a long time, and it's very important to me. And so they called us. Megaphone goes out, and I think we had a petition that was signed by 3,000 or 4,000 people. We were able to submit that both as written testimony and at public meetings. There's other organizations like the Oregon Hunters Association that got involved, and we're helping out. And at the end of the day, that land board voted not to sell, but to change the designation, right? And so instead of being like we got to make only money, let's treat it more like a wildlife management area. So that's a huge success story.
Giant.
And then right now, in Utah. There's a land sale that's I think it's 41,000 acres that's up for sale right now, and so that's because it's school trust lands. The state agency is allowed to bid, and so I can't remember exactly what their bid is, but it's like in the millions and millions of dollars to try to buy that piece, but somebody could outbid them. Right, and so here again, like it's state land. You have a state fish and game agency is like, man, that's pretty important mule deer habitat.
Yeah,
we would like to keep that in the public's hands. But somebody could outbid that, right? And so, there's many other examples besides that, but the states, like, again, I think we were on a wildlife management area, and those are much different. If it was all transferred and said they were all going to be wildlife management areas, that's a discussion that I would actually entertain, right? Because that is for wildlife habitat first, and recreation first. And so, that, to me, we make sure that we have it. Now, again, if they stay within federal management, then that's up to multiple use, and then all those things are on the same playing field, which actually is probably a better way to manage. So I think the states have proven really. Again, when you talk about Wisconsin, when states get in trouble, what are they going to do? They're going to start looking ways to make money, and how are they going to do that? And it's either selling or exploiting.
Yeah.
And part of that, state and federal, they operate under different rules. They have a different playbook, right?
Absolutely.
Can you touch on that a little bit? Maybe why things are more at risk under maybe a state, management versus a federal? And you probably, I think you did already, but
reiterate, and then I got a point that I want to make after that.
I can touch on stuff states generally have a requirement to balance the budget every year. Right. So you get in a hole one year, what you going to do? How are you going to make money?
Right.
Why did Wisconsin sell 10,000 acres over 3 years? We need some money. What are we going to do? And there's weird things in the East that end up a little bit different when it comes to federal land. Say Michigan. Michigan had a land cap. Okay, you transfer the 3 million acres in Michigan to the state, that would have to be sold in 9 months.
Because they had a land
can't have
cap.
any more.
Because they can't have any more land.
No net gain.
They have no net gain. So the state by law can only own so many acres, right? So if they were to have that land, the federal land within the borders, transferred to the state,
They would have to
sell it.
sell it.
Yeah, it's like 3 million acres of land.
So is that a federal law or a state law?
That's a state law.
That'd be a state law.
Yeah.
That's
huge.
And the point, there had to have been a reason behind that. Who knows?
It was because
Maybe they were trying to.
It was a recent law. It's because certain politicians don't like public lands. They're like, we don't want the state to own more lands.
They want more private land.
Yeah,
right.
they figure.
Have they ever been outside?
Yeah, exactly.
But that's partly. But I think, Mark, that's a good question. So why do they not want it? And I think it's partly so they can either have it for themselves, right, and they don't have to share it, right? Think about if the Homestead Act was again today. You could go find those places in our favorite public lands right now and say, stake my claim, and I got my whatever it is, 160 acres, whatever that was. That would be awesome in some ways, but then there's also a lot of spots that I'm I can't be everywhere at once. Somebody else is going to stake a spot that I'll never get back. But I think part of that is keeping it for yourself.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is that when it's private land, there's less of a process on how that land is going to be managed, and so that if it's private, then the exploitation becomes much easier, right? And so I think that's why they want it.